Welcome to the Marriage Unmasked podcast. I have a question for you. Have you ever felt completely alone when your spouse is sitting right next to you? Maybe there's an ache that you can't explain. It might look fine right on the outside, but there's this ache in your heart. Or maybe there's a panic when your needs are not met. Or you're feeling shut down when you feel invisible in the relationship. These are all signs of an abandonment wound. And we want to talk about that more today. I think this is a really prevalent thing, but maybe not specifically known as the abandonment wound. And we don't need to get hung up on terms, but this is a real issue for many people. We talk a lot about healing on the podcast. We talk a lot about healing in our Healing Your Marriage course.
Yeah.
And it's these wounds, it's wounds like this that we're talking about healing. And so we want to kind of dig into this a little bit more, what really the abandonment wound is, how it looks in marriage, and give you tools and things like that to work through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what is an abandonment wound? It's formed often when somebody very important to you, for whatever reason, becomes emotionally unavailable to you. Or even physically unavailable to you as well. And a lot of times at childhood, you get these abandonment wounds. So parents get divorced, and now you're going between the two parents, and maybe you don't feel as close to one because they're not as available to you physically or emotionally, and so you may form an abandonment wound around that disconnection.
Or if a parent has left, right? Like
Yeah.
if your father left when you were little, or your mother, right? That's going to be obviously a big abandonment wound.
Yeah. It can also come from inconsistent parenting, where you don't know what you're going to get from your parents. One minute they're meeting your needs just fine, and then the next minute you're like crying out, you have a need, and it's not being met. They seem distant, or they seem cold, or whatever it is. And that can form this abandonment wound. It can be from caregivers that are just emotionally distant. They have a shell on, and they're not really open to you. They're not really fulfilling your need for connection with them. And so you can form an abandonment wound in childhood from a lot of different sources. And it can also show up in the marriage relationship, and you can form an abandonment wound in your marriage as well. And that can often be the case if one spouse, for whatever reason, they're being unavailable to your desire for connection with them. Maybe they are physically distracted, going to work, staying at work long hours, leaving you alone. Maybe they are emotionally shut down for whatever. Maybe they have their own wounds, but that can then create this abandonment wound inside the marriage as well.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about, when you were a kid, because that's what a lot of this comes from. Our brains are developed so much, and a lot of the programming happens when we are young, and especially when we're fully dependent on our parents to meet our needs. And we have these emotional needs that God created in us, and when they don't get met, right, that can create these wounds. And no shade to our parents.
Yeah.
We're not blaming them because they're human beings too, and they have wounds. And a lot of times, I think, especially for like our age and our parents, they didn't, they weren't learning these things or healing them. And so a lot of the wounds that we have are from our parents' wounds, even kind of being acted out, right? So for example, I know when I've been working on healing my own abandonment wound, because I didn't know what this was really until a couple of years ago, and then I was like, okay, this is really a thing for me. And I'm one of 8 kids, so one of my core deep wounds or pains is I don't matter. I felt that way a lot growing up, and I remember specifically, like, this is one of the ones I go back to when I'm working on my healing, is like there were several times when I was little and I was supposed to be picked up by my parents at school or after a sporting event or something, and I'm just sitting there waiting and they're never coming, and I'm the only one. All the other kids, their parents have picked them up, and I'm there alone, right? Or my parents forgot to pick me up. And again, I'm not necessarily judging that for them, but I'm also not going to invalidate my own pain in that. That was very painful to feel like you don't, the story in my head was like, I don't matter to them. They didn't even remember to pick me up. And so that's one of the wounds, for me. And there were so many others where, yeah, I have a need for some comfort when I'm emotional, and I get the like, okay, stop crying, right? Or, get over it. Just get over it when I'm trying to share my pain or a need that I have. Like, just get over it, right? And so these are some examples of like what this might look like for somebody, to have these abandonment wounds. What about you? Did you have some abandonment wounds from when you were a kid?
Um, I think if I do, they're really early on. Almost before my like recollection. It is interesting. Because I see signs of the abandonment wound like showing up. So I have some more digging to do around that, around my own childhood and the abandonment wound, because they say like people pleasing and kind of like this anxiousness around a relationship is often formed by an abandonment wound. And so I actually have more work to do to really pinpoint where that came from in my childhood. I think it's definitely there, and it might be really early. I'm one of four, and when I was really little, I mean, we were very close together, kids all in a row. So every year having a baby, I mean, it could be that even early as when I'm four and my mom's dealing with all kinds of little babies in the house, and I'm feeling like I'm just playing over here in the corner. I don't know. It's very possible that it came from something like that, but some of that anxious stuff that like anxiousness in a relationship or people pleasing, trying to get your needs met through some of those kind of ways, they've showed up in my life for many years. And that could be partly from an abandonment wound.
And I mean, abandonment isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like apathy, where the person that you're desiring to be there for you is just passive, or they're just distracted, or they are not noticing your pain. And so it's not always loud. It doesn't always look like a parent leaving the family or being left at school or whatever, right? Sometimes it kind of can be sneaky like that. But how does this show up in marriage? I think a lot of times I see wives that I'm working with, they're over giving to prove their worth. They're just going overboard. And you kind of talked about the anxious attachment. I think that's part of it, where you are kind of tiptoeing around, and maybe not setting boundaries, maybe not really expressing your needs very clearly, because you're anxious that they're going to leave.
Yeah, you're afraid of being abandoned in that. So yeah, like you're doing everything. You're being very hyper vigilant, trying to like always kind of read the other person's mind so that you can show up a certain way to get their love, to get their affection.
I know for me in marriage, it's looked like getting really upset, angry, just really big pain when I feel ignored. When I say something to Adam, I express a need that I have, or I express like, when this happens, I feel this way, and I really don't want this to happen again. But then it keeps happening, and I feel ignored. It's going back to that wound, that story of I don't matter. He's ignoring me. He doesn't care about what I'm saying. I've said it over and over and over, and he doesn't care, right? That's the story in my head.
Yeah.
And so that's big pain, and I get very angry, which then can kind of trigger him,
Yeah.
right? And the way it shows up a lot of times in marriage is this kind of triggering effect where, one person is upset and they're expressing that, and then sometimes it's the wife, and then it's the husband who's kind of like shutting down,
And that's just going to make it worse because
Right.
you're shutting down, you're withdrawing
Right.
from
Exactly.
the connection even more. And I know sometimes it's been confusing in marriage too, because I know there's been times where you're like crying out for connection, and then it seems like like when that abandonment wound gets kicked in, then you like close off. And so it's like it's been confusing for me at times to navigate that. Like you seem to want closeness, but then you like put up a wall and like shut down and become cold, probably out of like a protection, because you're feeling that abandonment, and you don't so that
No, it's absolutely a protection. When you're triggered in that, and you have expressed what you need, and you are trying to open your heart, and then you get abandoned, right? You feel that abandonment wound trigger, then your nervous system, it's not even like, okay, I am going to put up a wall and I don't want to talk
It's
to
not
him
a
anymore.
conscious thing. It's not like consciously chosen. It just happens.
Because my nervous system is saying this is unsafe.
Right.
He's going to abandon you, or he is abandoning you. He's not, he doesn't care about you, right? And so it's like, okay, well, we don't want to have anything to do with that because that's painful.
It's almost like you wanted connection, but now I've decided I have to do this alone. I've decided I can't have connection, so I'm going to just cut it off, and I'm not going to welcome any connection. And some of those times is when I think I felt my abandonment wound. Then is like she's shut down, she's cold, and I can be a little bit more of that anxious, like, okay, well, how do I fix this? Trying to fix it, trying to tap at that wall, trying to break back in, and not fully understanding how that door got shut. So it takes a lot of awareness of what these wounds are. It takes a lot of knowing your spouse to understand this is maybe what's going on. I just put out a free masterclass on this topic of how to get heard by your husband without triggering defensiveness or shutdown. And this is kind of this cycle where I'm, for example, like I'm really angry. I'm really upset. I'm in big pain because I feel ignored. And so I'm expressing that to him. Yeah. And so what's he doing? He's getting defensive. He's giving me a bunch of excuses instead of hearing me and saying, and knowing like she's hurting right now. I'm going to love her. I'm going to hold space. He instead making it about me. Yep, makes it about him, makes a bunch of excuses, and then that triggers me even more. Right? Such a vicious cycle. Yeah, so then I'm kind of shutting down, and then he shuts down. It's like it is. It's just you start to trigger each other, coping with the situation in an unhealthy way, and it just keeps going back and forth, and it can escalate. And what's really happening, like we kind of talked about in the brain, is like when your emotional needs go unmet, especially during pain, your brain encodes this as abandonment, and that's when, again, like we were talking about, I put up the wall. Yeah. It's survival mode again. Yes. You're trying to survive. It's like you're going into some of those like freeze, flight, or fawn. Or... Yeah, and it's remembering, like your brain is going back to when you were little and you cried and nobody came, right? Or your parent told you to stop crying. Just stop crying, right? Stop. Or you're having a tantrum because you're upset because you, for whatever reason, like you aren't getting your need met. And so as a little kid, you don't know how to express that. And so you have a tantrum and your parent tells you, stop that right now, or you're going to your room. And they put you in your room. You go to your room until you stop. Now you're abandoned. And you're abandoned, right? And again, we don't want to blame. We're not trying to judge. We all try to do our best as parents, and if you're a parent like us, we're like, we've done this. You can look back on times that you've parented, and you're just like, oh man, I wish I would have known what I know now back then. But you have to give yourself grace too, and forgiveness for none of us are perfect. No, and we're all learning and we're growing, and that is something to be celebrated. So, absolutely. Maybe this is the first time you're learning this today, and you're like, "Oh, I've done that. I do that as a parent." That's okay. It's okay. You're learning new things, and you're going to go forward in a new way, and that's to be applauded. So, what this wound is really saying is, I'm not worth staying for. Right? Like I was talking about, I don't matter. Love is unsafe. To love somebody, maybe that feels really unsafe to you because I'm going to be abandoned. Yeah, it's like you're putting yourself out there, you're being emotionally available, you're opening yourself up, and the great fear is that that door is going to be shut, that you're going to be left alone, you're going to be left hanging in that emotion. And yeah, that's super painful. Yeah, and sometimes it goes into like I'm not enough, or I'm too much because when I did this, I was abandoned, or because I didn't do this right, I was abandoned. And so this is where some of these stories come from. And for Christians, we might even shame ourselves when this happens for even having a wound. Like, I should be fine. But there's no need for that either. There's no need for that. God designed us for spiritual and emotional intimacy, and ignoring it doesn't help. Yeah, and there's no good thing that comes from beating yourself up about some of these reactions. You can start to abandon yourself by doing that, and you become more disconnected with your own heart and who you are because you're so busy trying to beat yourself up to change something that you don't fully understand. It's not fully healed inside of yourself. That's not how these kind of things are going to be healed. They're not going to be healed by shaming yourself into a new frame of mind.
Or ignoring it.
Yeah, ignoring it. Love is what's going to heal these things. Letting love in, being known and seen by God, and feeling safe in Him is really where some of that healing comes.
Well, and the first step then is to be honest about it, to acknowledge it, to be aware, and that's what you're doing today. And so this is really powerful, because you can't grieve what you won't acknowledge, and you can't heal what you're maybe blaming your spouse for right now. Right now it seems like, well, yeah, he doesn't care about my needs. He's not meeting my needs. And so it's easy to blame them, but what's needed is to get really honest with yourself and dig into some of this stuff. And so what healing looks like, and we talk a lot more about this in our Healing Your Marriage course, that we have a whole module on inner healing. And it's really powerful for so many different situations. But really what it comes down to is when you realize, like maybe you're like, oh, I'm feeling that panic, or I'm feeling that big pain right now, and you realize you're experiencing this abandonment wound, and to validate that emotion, and tell yourself, talk to yourself. I talk to myself. This is what we do, right? It's okay. But talk to yourself and let yourself know. It's kind of all like reparenting your own heart, right? There's that little you in there still, and even you in the moment right now as an adult, you do need this validation. And so to just like, that matters to me. I care that you are feeling so hurt right now, and offer love and compassion to yourself, letting yourself know, like, I'm not going to abandon you. Like, I'm going to be here with you while you're hurting. And it is okay for you to feel that, right? That's really the first step. And also really like getting back into your body and calming your nervous system down, because when you're feeling that kind of pain, like we talked about, your nervous system is on high alert. And so just to like let yourself know, hey, I'm safe. I'm safe right now. Everything is okay, even while I'm feeling this pain. I am safe, right? And then just kind of grounding yourself in that place. And then the next step is really to invite God in. And it's perfect, because he's always perfectly there for you. He's always a perfectly safe place for you. He's never left you. So
I'm not going to abandon you.
No.
I am with you always, he says. So he is with us right now. He's with us no matter what we're going through, no matter how abandoned we may feel. The reality is that he's there. The reality is that he's there with his love, his forgiveness, his kindness, his hope.
Yeah, he is. He's not a shaming presence, or sometimes we think of God as like one of our parents. That's kind of how we picture him, but that's not who God is, right? He's perfect. So he's always perfectly loving you. And when I invite God in, I like to ask him, what do you think about this? Right? Or who do you say I am? Or how are you loving me right now? How are you a safe place for me right now? And really invite him in. And this is all so healing. It's so healing. And if you want more information on how to heal these kind of wounds, then you're definitely going to want to check out our Healing Your Marriage course, because we go a lot deeper there. But just, remember, you don't need to fix each other. Sometimes we think we need to. You can't fix each other, actually.
And often when you try to fix each other, it makes it worse. Like it causes more pain to try to fix each other.
Yeah, and you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to fix. You're a human being experiencing human emotions, and you're on a journey, and you don't have to be perfect. Just keep showing up for each other. Keep being honest with each other. In a triggered moment, I think this is a great thing to say to each other. If you're talking and you're realizing we're triggering each other, like saying, I know we're both hurting. I want to move toward you, not away. Can we try again?
Yeah, that's super powerful.
Just really acknowledging the pain that's there, and also acknowledging that you want to be close to them. You don't want to leave them. That's not, you want to be close. You want to be there for them. And maybe you're not doing that very well, but let's try again, right? It's going to be really powerful.
Yeah, it just clears the atmosphere a little bit and gives you almost like a reset where you can actually both calm down and be like, oh, okay, this is what's happening, and here's how we can come together. we can try again. We can actually communicate in a way that's not going to trigger each other again. And so it's very helpful to have like that reset.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that can be really helpful just for kind of staying daily connected and letting your spouse know that you are available for them, you are present for them daily is, just to ask the question like, is there anything that you need from me emotionally today? And first you can always go to God, right? You can always get your needs met with God, but it's God gave you your spouse for a reason, and it is to also be that cherry on the top with meeting your needs and being the support for you. And so that's a great question to ask daily.
Yeah. And that's especially helpful for a husband to ask his wife that. Sometimes a guy doesn't always know exactly what he needs emotionally in a day. But it's good for him to get in tune with that too and to understand what does he need, and to be able to communicate that to his wife. Because guys, we have emotional needs too. We absolutely do.
Yeah.
And when we ignore that or we don't think that's true, then those emotions can come out in unhealthy ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the last thing really that I think is really powerful to help with this is just to get outside support, work with a coach or, access, the Healing Your Marriage course, something like that where you're able to process, you have someone walking alongside with you that to offer clarity, and guidance, because you don't know what you don't know, and it can be confusing to walk through these things, and it can also get really discouraging, really exhausting. I mean, Adam and I, we have done a lot of work in trying to heal these wounds, and it is exhausting, and sometimes
hard,
you
yeah.
feel like you're going backward. You're like, is there any progress? How is this coming up for me again? I thought I healed this, right? And so to have that support can be really, really helpful, and just you know because I know that your goal is more connection with your spouse. And so this is the work that we need to do, right? This is some of the most impactful stuff you can do is to take ownership and heal these wounds for yourself. And although the abandonment wound might offer insight, right, into like, okay, what's going on kind of deep inside, it doesn't define you. And I don't always love it when
Yeah.
there's so much jargon in our industry, and it's like
Labels that people
yeah,
put on people,
yeah,
and then it's a label that you like live down to sometimes.
yeah,
You live
right.
into this label instead of just like, okay, that label's helpful perhaps for some information. It gives me some framework for maybe what's happening, but that doesn't mean that I'm stuck in this. I am an anxious attached person now.
Yeah.
When you put a label on it, sometimes that becomes part of your identity, and that doesn't need to happen.
Yeah, because that isn't who you are.
Right.
It doesn't define you. It doesn't define you to have wounds. It doesn't define you to have a specific wound. And I think there can be a trap too where you get this victim mindedness around it too,
Yeah.
where it's like, well, that was my abandonment. You triggered my abandonment wound. Poor me. Like I'm a victim to this. Like I have this wound, and this is the way it is, and this is how I show up in this way. You are empowered, right? That the whole point of us talking about this is to invite you into healing.
Yeah.
And so you're not a victim. You're not a victim. Just because you are becoming more aware of certain things doesn't mean you're a victim to them. So don't let this define you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Reach out if you need any support. We would love to hear your feedback on this episode as well as any others. And we'd love it if you'd share this podcast and bless a friend who could also use this. Share it with your spouse as well. It's really helpful when you're both talking about the things that you're learning and you're working on. It can be helpful to support each other in that too. So we'd love to hear your feedback, and we hope this was really impactful.